The most dangerous person in any confrontation isn't the biggest or the loudest. It's the one who stays completely still. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But this single insight transformed the life of one of history's greatest warriors, and it's going to change yours too. Let me tell you about Miyamoto Musashi, the deadliest samurai Japan ever produced, a man who never once tasted defeat. Over 60 life or death duels, 60 moments where losing meant dying on the spot. But here's what most people get wrong about Musashi. His edge wasn't his speed or his power. It was something far more destructive. His mental discipline was so refined that opponents were already unraveling before the first blow was ever thrown. While his enemies burned through their energy in rage and anxiety, Musashi stood in lethal calm. And here's what's remarkable. The exact mental strategies he forged in those bloody duels translate perfectly into the battles of everyday life. A boss who intimidates you, a family conflict that won't resolve, a stranger trying to bait you online, the principle remains the same. Whoever commands their mind commands the outcome. Here are the 4 mental principles Musashi developed to maintain absolute composure even as everything around him collapsed. Let me ask you something. When someone screams at you or comes at you aggressively, what happens inside? Your body tightens, your pulse spikes, a wave of anger starts climbing up your chest, and suddenly you're not thinking anymore, you're just reacting. This is the trap Musashi saw more clearly than anyone. The moment you let the emotions of a confrontation swallow you whole, you forfeit 2 things simultaneously: control of the situation and control of yourself. So his first principle has nothing to do with technique or physical ability. It goes much deeper. He called it emotional distance, the capacity to step back from what you're experiencing internally, to watch your own reactions the way you'd watch weather rolling across the sky. Musashi didn't become his anger or his fear. He simply noticed them rising and allowed them to pass through. That act of non-identification with the feeling is what shifts everything. Most of us collapse into our emotions without realizing it. When someone offends you, you say, "I am furious." You don't just feel it, you become it. It steers your words, your choices, your actions. You're no longer driving. The emotion is. Musashi approached it differently. He'd acknowledge the feeling without fusing with it. Instead of "I am angry," he'd simply note, "There is anger present right now." That tiny linguistic shift opens a gap between you and the emotion, and inside that gap lies your freedom to choose. Try this today. In any tense moment, pause and silently label what you're experiencing. I notice I'm feeling irritated. I notice I'm feeling threatened. That simple act of naming creates distance. Over time, the gap widens, and so does your control. The goal isn't to bury what you feel. It's to stop letting it make your decisions for you. When you establish that distance, the internal storm begins to quiet, and that's where your real power begins. Most people walk into a confrontation completely blind. They improvise, react, and try to survive the moment. Musashi did the opposite, to stay calm. He believed you have to know what's coming before it arrives. This is his second principle: anticipatory awareness. He called it foreknowledge, not mind reading, but pattern recognition. Because under pressure, human beings are remarkably predictable. Fear narrows the same choices. Impatience exposes the same weaknesses. Before every duel, Musashi studied his opponent, how they moved, how they cracked under stress, what strikes they defaulted to. Nothing was left to chance. In his most legendary duel against Sasaki Kojiro, Musashi had already mapped his opponent's psychology. He knew Kojiro was vain, easily provoked, and wielded an unusually long sword. So he showed up late, deliberately stoking that impatience, and carved himself a wooden blade slightly longer than Kojiro's on the way there. The fight was won before it started. You can apply this immediately. Before any difficult conversation, give yourself 30 seconds and answer 3 questions. What emotional state is this person likely in right now? What do they actually want from this interaction? What are the 3 most probable ways they'll respond? This brief preparation rewires how your brain enters the situation. Instead of bracing for shock, it shifts. Hostage negotiators do exactly this before every high-stakes conversation, mapping emotional profiles and anticipating likely responses before a single word is exchanged. Research in behavioral science confirms it. When we mentally rehearse someone's likely reactions, the brain prepares differently. Surprise is what triggers panic. Anticipation replaces panic with clarity. The more fluent you become in reading emotional patterns, the less people can destabilize you. And that composure in a world designed to provoke constant reaction is one of the most formidable things you can possess. Musashi understood that breathing was the direct link between the body and the mind. He noticed that the first thing to change in a frightened or enraged opponent wasn't their stance or their grip. It was their breath.
Short, shallow,
uneven. And that disrupted breathing was always the first signal of a collapsing mind. So his third principle is strategic breathing. Musashi didn't just regulate his movements during battle. He regulated every breath. He understood that whoever controls their breathing controls their inner state. It wasn't a ritual, it was a tactical weapon. Modern neuroscience backs this completely. Slow, deliberate breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's built-in mechanism for returning to calm. One researcher described it as a biological switch. You can shift from high alert to centered awareness in seconds. Rapid breathing floods the brain with stress hormones that destroy clear thinking. Slow breathing reverses that process in real time. Musashi's technique was simple. Before any decisive moment, inhale through the nose for 4 counts, brief hold, exhale through the mouth for 6 counts. That single cycle created alignment between body and mind, a pocket of stillness inside the chaos. Use this today. In a heated meeting, a difficult conversation before delivering hard news. 1 breath. In for 4, hold briefly, out for 6. Repeat 2 or 3 times and feel the tension release through your entire body. It's an internal reset. A reminder that regardless of what's happening outside, you hold the ability to generate calm within. For Musashi, that calm was the foundation of everything. For us, it's the foundation of clearer thinking, better decisions, and a more grounded life. Picture yourself in the middle of an escalating argument. Emotions are surging, words are landing like blows, tension has taken over the room. Most people in this scenario have one instinct: win, prove their point, retaliate, score the point. Musashi moved differently. He never fought to satisfy his ego. He fought with a defined purpose. That's his 4th and final principle: purposeful action. He believed that entering any confrontation without a clear objective was the same as swinging blind. His opponents arrived fueled by pride, fear, and the hunger to dominate. Musashi arrived knowing precisely what he wanted from every single movement. He wrote that the warrior must not seek to strike first, but must remain anchored to his greater aim. That clarity is what kept him from being pulled under by emotional currents. And in modern conflict, this discipline matters even more. How many arguments have you been in that started over something real, then spiraled into old grievances, buried resentments, and accusations that had nothing to do with the original issue? That happens the moment everyone forgets why the conversation started. When purpose evaporates, everything turns to noise. The practice is straightforward. Before any confrontation, whether it's a tense exchange, a difficult meeting, or even a sensitive message you're drafting, pause and ask yourself one question: what is my actual goal here? Write it in a single, clear sentence. Something like, I want to clear up this misunderstanding without making things worse. Or, I want to stand my ground without tearing someone down. Or simply, I want to protect my peace. Then, when the conversation heats up and emotions start pulling at you, return to that sentence mentally. It becomes your anchor. Your words and actions begin serving your intention rather than your wounded pride. And here's what surprises most people. Clarity of purpose doesn't make you cold. It actually gives your emotions direction. They stop working against you and start working towards something that matters. Musashi grasped this at the deepest level. His calm wasn't the absence of feeling. It was the presence of clarity. And that clarity came from knowing exactly what he was there for. When you know what you're truly fighting for, you get to decide when it's worth fighting, and more critically, when it isn't. Real power isn't found in winning every confrontation. It's in outgrowing the need to have them. Musashi discovered this centuries ago, that the pinnacle of combat mastery had nothing to do with defeating another person and everything to do with mastering yourself. His 4 principles: emotional distance, anticipatory awareness, strategic breathing, and purposeful action, aren't just battlefield strategies. They're a framework for living with greater consciousness, stability, and freedom. What he ultimately left us transcends swords and duels. It's a philosophy rooted in not being enslaved by passing emotions, in seeing situations with precision, and in acting with genuine intention. The same wisdom echoes through Buddhism in the teaching of non-identification with the ego, and through Taoism in the concept of wu-wei, action that flows naturally rather than forcing against the current. We live today in a landscape engineered to provoke. Social media, traffic, politics, even close relationships, everything seems to be reaching for an immediate reaction from you. But the truly powerful person in this environment isn't the one who's loudest or most aggressive. It's the one who remains centered while everyone else fractures. The one who chooses deliberately where their energy belongs, and who recognizes that sometimes silence is the most powerful answer available. As you begin practicing these principles, something curious happens. Many conflicts simply dissolve, not because the world changed, but because you did. And in transforming yourself, you shift the nature of every interaction around you. Like Musashi, you stop being someone who merely survives battles. You become someone who no longer needs them. This is the path, not of force but of inner strength. If this landed with you, take one breath right now and remember, true control was never about power over others. It was always about awareness of yourself. Are you ready to walk that path?